What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Throughout all the champions in League of Legends, there's some seriously awesome abilities in the game. Some of them really stick out to you and create super interesting dynamics, not only for the champion, but for the game that they're in. As we count down the list, we'll be measuring these abilities by how interesting, unique, and honestly just how damn cool these abilities are. Also, please keep in mind that this list was actually the hardest top 10 list to make that I've ever made, so please go easy on me if you disagree, and let me know what you think of the format I'm trying out for honorable mentions. Anyways, let's get started. Number 10 is Mordekaiser's ultimate, Children of the Grave. This ability definitely capitalizes on the cool factor, being the only ability that summons a ghost of your opponents and even sometimes a ghost of the dragon. An ability that scales in power based off of the strength of your opponents, and that the stronger your opponents are, the stronger your ghost will be, is super interesting, and the ability is certainly quite unique. In addition, stealing stats from the enemy champion whose ghost he captures is really cool too. And it's also the only ability that spawns something that has infinite range, in that the dragon can be controlled to move across the entire map for the duration of the summon. Number 9 is Callisto's ultimate, Fate's Call. The interaction this ability creates with an ally is very unique in the sense that it's the only ability in the game that puts crowd control in the hand of an ally and gives them the power. It's also an awesome tool to save someone in a really sticky situation and can lead to some interesting team comps involving very weird support picks like we saw with support Kennen. Giving your ally a skill shot is something that's really cool, and the ability works really well and generates a lot of options in a lot of situations. Number 8 is Draven's Q, Spinning Axe. Here we get into the first ability that might not be as cool or as exciting as some of the others, but definitely maxes out in the interesting factor. It creates this whole micro game around not dropping the axe and juggling it between targets, while also creating an interaction with the opponents to punish you for catching the axes, since they can of course see where an axe will land on the ground. This juggling minigame rewards you heavily for doing well in the form of massive damage, but can also punish you since it causes you to have predictable movements, so it gives you a bonus in power at the cost of making it easier for your opponents to outplay you, which is a really interesting dynamic since it defines the entire playstyle that Draven as a champion has. Number 7 is Heimerdinger's Q, H28G Evolution Turret. Similar to Draven's Axe, this ability creates a very interesting playstyle by giving Heimerdinger a lot of sustained damage, but making him completely immobile. It encourages him to fight around his turrets, meaning it's hard to kite around and still deal constant DPS unless you can set up a choke point. It creates such an interesting character dynamic based on his turrets, that so much of his power is based around positioning them properly and setting them up, and that opponents can also choose to focus the turrets down to deny some of his DPS, or ignore them to take a bit more damage. Okay, to an uneducated or maybe an unexperienced player when it comes to facing Heimerdinger, it can be quite frustrating, but when you boil down to the details, it creates quite a unique playstyle for Heimerdinger as a champion to play as and to play against. Number 6 is Azir's W, Arise. Summoning characters that completely change the dynamic of Azir's kit results in this really unique style of a control mage that is the only ability in the game that summons something that replaces his base auto attacks. Not to mention how they interact with the rest of his kit to completely define the skill set he has as a champion. Instead of an auto attack modifier like something maybe Kayle has, it replaces his auto attacks completely and changes the dynamic of them to be short-ranged, piercing melee attacks, but still at a distance to Azir, which is totally unique and results in a really awesome champion. Number 5 is Cassiopeia's ultimate, Petrifying Gaze. This is probably my personal favorite ability on the list because I love playing Cassiopeia, and the interaction her ult creates as an ability is something I think is actually fantastic game design and leads to some really awesome gameplay. The ability has a really long animation, so it tends to be typically fairly easy to outplay, in the sense that all you have to do is be paying attention to it and then click backwards. But the reward for landing the ultimate properly is huge in a 2-second area of effect stun that will definitely allow you to combo out the rest of the damage needed to kill your targets. However, since it's so easy to outplay, it creates this mechanic of trying to set up, position, and bait out your opponents into looking at you to land the stun, causing this super powerful control ability to have a ton of skill involved in it based on both you personally as the Cassiopeia player setting it up, and your opponents anticipating it and outplaying you. Number 4 is Tahm Kench's W, Devour. This ability earns its spot based on the options it gives Tahm Kench by generating interactions with both his allies and his opponents. It's so unique in the sense that it's such a weird and dynamic and honestly kind of goofy ability that's still incredibly effective, and I think that's really awesome. You can use it to save your teammates or even give them some mobility by running around with them, or you can use it to pick off your opponents or maybe just lock them down and take them out of the fight for an extended duration. Combined with the mechanic of spitting out things in a certain direction, the ability has a lot of really interesting aspects to it, with the way it affects his movement speed, as well as the way he can use it with minions for some decent damage at range, or to just deal a bunch of damage to the opponent he ate, along with some crazy things such as swallowing jungle monsters to potentially steal a jungle camp. This and a whole lot else are what result in this awesome ability. Number 3 is Gangplank's E, Powder Keg. Now that it's been toned down a bit, we can definitely look at the crazy characteristics this ability has beyond just massive damage. By being attackable, it creates really interesting interactions with the opponents, while also comboing with itself to pull off some really awesome shenanigans. It creates a high pressure zone around the barrel that requires a lot of skill to position effectively, but can also punish the positioning of your opponents in the sense that they can usually choose whether or not to walk into the zone of the barrel. The way it ends up working out with the charges is also awesome too, in that if you wait a bit longer to stack up some charges, you can significantly extend the range of the ability by comboing some of the barrels together. The thing is, the opponents are always going to have the ability to either kill the barrel or not walk into the zone unless they're being crowd control or something, and I'm really fond of that interaction that Powder Keg creates. The way it interacts with movement speed as well and is passive causes the ability to have a huge reward when pulled off properly, but the high skill elements keep it in check, at least it will now that it's been toned down a bit, and result in an ability that I think is super unique and really fits the pirate theme that Gangplank is trying to go for. Number 2 is Bard's E, Magical Journey. This one definitely takes the cake in the unique category in that there's really no ability like it in the entire game. Giving mobility to your opponents and to your allies is such a cool interaction that Bard has that can result in a lot of really crazy shenanigans that can save your teammates or even sometimes punish them. The fact that it affects your allies in almost the exact same way it affects your opponents is really unique, and the crazy range this ability can cover, along with the way it relies on using the map, is really awesome and allows the ability to have much more interesting dynamics. Whereas other mobility tends to be stifled by the map and its interactions and the walls, Magical Journey relies on the map and its walls completely to make use of it. It thrives on taking advantage of the walls the map has to offer and leads to some awesome and very hilarious plays quite consistently. And number 1 is Echo's W, Parallel Convergence. Now this one might seem a little bit weird to have at the top on first glance, so hear me out. First off, it cashes in on the cool factor by being this super flashy animated ability that overall just has really cool effects. It also maxes out on the unique and interesting factor due to the interactions this ability creates with its fairly overloaded nature. It's a hugely rewarding ability with both a stun and a shield if landed properly, but with a massive delay of 3 seconds and the interaction of requiring Echo to have to walk into the zone is just super interesting to me, and creating a possibility to punish him by denying entry into the zone or by outplaying him with his predictable movement and engage. No other crowd control ability in the game even comes close to the way it works, and although the overloaded factor of the kit is arguably imbalanced, that certainly adds to the interesting and cool aspects by adding an execute passive for his auto attacks. Everything comes together with all of these crazy aspects, interactions with the opponents and Echo himself, and overloaded power to create what I think is the most interesting and unique champion ability in League of Legends.